The last radio transmission from Howard Miller came at 2:47 p.m. on March 13, 2011. According to flight control records at Talkeetna Regional Airport, Miller reported clear skies and steady progress along his planned route through the Alaska Range. His single-engine Cessna 185 was carrying supplies to a remote research station near Denali National Park, a routine flight he had completed dozens of times over his 15-year career as a bush pilot. The flight log indicated an expected arrival time of 4:15 p.m. Miller's final words to air traffic control were documented as, "Visibility excellent at 12,000 feet. Should be an easy run. We'll check in at the next waypoint." No subsequent communication was received. When Miller failed to arrive at the research station by 5:30 p.m., Dr. Catherine Landon, lead scientist at the facility, followed protocol by attempting radio contact. After receiving no response through multiple channels, she reported the situation to the Alaska State Troopers at 5:47 p.m. The weather conditions remained favorable throughout the evening, with ceiling visibility at 15,000 feet and winds at 8 knots from the southwest. According to the National Weather Service's archived data, no significant meteorological events were recorded in the region during the projected flight path. The Alaska Air National Guard initiated search operations at first light on March 14, 2011, deploying 2 HH-60 Pavehawk helicopters and a HC-130 search aircraft from the 210th and 211th Rescue Squadrons. The search parameters covered a 50-mile radius from Miller's last known coordinates, focusing on the Kahiltna Glacier region and surrounding valleys where radar had last tracked the aircraft. Ground teams from Alaska Mountain Rescue were dispatched to high-probability areas, utilizing snowmobiles and ski equipment to access the more rugged terrain. Colonel James Harrington, who commanded the search operation, documented the comprehensive nature of the effort in his after-action report. "We conducted systematic grid patterns, covering 4,200 square miles of mountainous terrain. Weather conditions were optimal for aerial reconnaissance, with visibility extending to the horizon on most days. Every drainage, valley, and potential emergency landing zone was photographed and examined by trained spotters. We deployed infrared scanning technology during night operations to detect any heat signature that might indicate a survivor or recently operated aircraft engine." The search continued for 17 days before being officially classified as a recovery mission on March 31, 2011. The operation involved 157 personnel, logged 237 flight hours, and cost approximately $1.3 million, according to Alaska Department of Public Safety records. Despite the extensive resources allocated, no debris field, emergency locator transmitter signal, or visual confirmation of the aircraft was obtained. Miller was officially declared missing, presumed deceased, on April 17, 2011, following standard protocols for aviation incidents without recoverable remains. Howard Miller's professional history showed an exemplary safety record. Federal Aviation Administration documents confirmed he had accumulated 9,176 flight hours, maintained all required certifications, and passed his most recent medical examination on January 22, 2011. His aircraft had undergone standard maintenance inspections 10 days before the disappearance, with the mechanic's log noting all systems functioning within normal parameters. The Cessna 185, tail number N4753A, was manufactured in 1997 and had logged 5,230 hours of flight time. The aircraft was equipped with emergency survival gear, including cold weather equipment rated for temperatures to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Miller's disappearance generated moderate media coverage within Alaska, but received limited national attention. According to archives from the Anchorage Daily News, The story appeared on the front page for 3 consecutive days before moving to the interior sections as the search continued without developments. Miller was survived by his wife Ellen and 2 daughters ages 17 and 14 at the time of his disappearance. The family established a memorial scholarship fund for students pursuing aviation careers at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. As with many missing aircraft cases in Alaska's vast wilderness, the investigation eventually became inactive. The case file, maintained by the Alaska State Troopers, remained technically open but received no significant updates between 2012 and 2025. According to department policy, missing persons cases are never officially closed until resolution is achieved, but active investigation resources are reallocated based on probability of resolution and emergence of new evidence. The Alaska Range, with its extreme topography and weather conditions, has claimed numerous aircraft over the decades. According to the Alaska Aviation Safety Foundation, approximately 42% of aircraft reported missing in the region between 1955 and 2020 were never recovered. The Foundation's statistical analysis cites deep snowpack, shifting glaciers, and inaccessible terrain as primary factors in failed recovery efforts. Miller's disappearance represented one data point in this ongoing pattern of aviation mysteries in North America's most challenging flying environment. On July 8, 2025, 14 years and 4 months after the disappearance, backcountry guide Thomas Erickson was leading a group of 5 climbers on an off-trail expedition through a remote section of the Alaska Range, approximately 28 miles northwest of Miller's last reported position. The group was traversing a high alpine cirque at approximately 10,700 feet of elevation when Erickson observed an unusual discoloration in the snowfield ahead. His written statement to the Alaska State Troopers described the discovery. At first I thought it was just shadow from the surrounding peaks, but as we got closer I could see something solid underneath, about 2 feet of snow and ice. A section about the size of a dinner plate had melted through due to the dark material absorbing more solar radiation. Through this opening I could see what appeared to be metal and paint. Erickson, who carried a satellite communication device as standard equipment, contacted emergency services at 2:13 p.m. Following established wilderness protocols, he instructed his clients to establish a camp 200 yards from the site while marking the location with survey flags from his pack. Alaska State Troopers dispatched a helicopter from Fairbanks, arriving at the coordinates at 4:40 p.m. Troopers Kyle Jenkins and Marissa Wong documented their initial assessment. The visible portion appeared to be the upper surface of an aircraft wing with partial blue and white coloration consistent with civilian aircraft paint schemes. The majority of the object remained buried under compacted snow with an estimated depth of 6 to 12 feet, varying across the site. Due to the approaching evening and limited daylight, the troopers collected GPS coordinates, photographed the visible sections, and placed marker poles before returning to Fairbanks. A full recovery team was assembled and deployed at 6:30 a.m. on July 9, 2025. The team included 4 state troopers, 2 FAA investigators, a forensic technician, and 3 snow removal specialists with alpine excavation experience. Equipment was transported via 2 Alaska Department of Public Safety UH-60 helicopters, including thermal desing equipment, carbon fiber probes, and ground-penetrating radar units. Upon arrival at the site at 8:15 a.m., the team established a perimeter and conducted an initial survey using ground-penetrating radar. The results indicated a solid mass, approximately 40 feet in length, buried beneath the snow, consistent with the dimensions of a small aircraft. The excavation process began at 9:27 a.m. utilizing heated probes to melt channels through the compacted snow while maintaining the integrity of potential evidence. By 11:45 a.m., the team had exposed approximately 30% of what was confirmed to be a Cessna 185 aircraft, with registration numbers matching the missing plane piloted by Howard Miller in 2011. Lead investigator Sergeant Daniel Kowalski documented the progressive revelation in his official report. As we continued the careful excavation process, it became evident that the aircraft was largely intact, suggesting it had not experienced catastrophic impact damage. The fuselage maintained its structural integrity, though the port wing showed compression damage consistent with a controlled emergency landing. Snow accumulation patterns indicated the aircraft had been gradually buried by seasonal snowfall and glacial movement over the 14-year period. At 2:37 p.m., the excavation team reached the cockpit section of the aircraft. The official record of this moment, as transcribed from body-worn cameras, captured the unexpected discovery that would transform the nature of the investigation. Forensic technician Alicia Navarro's voice can be heard stating, "We have visual on the interior now. There appears to be... There's an occupant. Repeat, we have a body in the pilot's seat." The recovery operation was immediately reclassified as a potential crime scene, with all personnel instructed to withdraw except essential investigative staff. Additional lighting equipment was requested from Fairbanks, while the remaining team secured the site perimeter with evidence tape. State Medical Examiner Dr. Robert Chen was contacted and transported to the location via priority air transport, arriving at 4:22 p.m. The preliminary examination of the cockpit, conducted jointly by Dr. Chen and forensic technician Navarro, revealed that the body was in a remarkably preserved state due to the consistently below freezing temperatures of its snow encasement. The remains were identified as male, seated in the pilot's position, with hands positioned on the control yoke. The subject was wearing cold weather aviation gear, consistent with what Miller would have been expected to utilize for the flight. A pilot's logbook was visible in a side compartment, and a partially consumed bottle of water was secured in the center console holder. Dr. Chen's initial assessment, recorded in his field notes, indicated, "Subject presents with no immediately visible traumatic injuries. Preservation is extensive due to effective natural cryogenic conditions. Facial features remain recognizable when compared to photographs of the missing pilot. The positioning of the body suggests the subject was actively piloting the aircraft at the time of death, rather than attempting to exit or address an emergency situation. No signs of fire, smoke damage, or rapid decompression are immediately apparent." As daylight began to wane, the decision was made to secure the site overnight, with 2 troopers maintaining scene integrity. The following morning, July 10, 2025, a comprehensive recovery operation commenced at 7 a.m. The aircraft was systematically documented in its discovered position using photogrammetry and 3D scanning equipment. The surrounding snowpack was excavated in layers, with each level photographed and examined for any evidence that might have been ejected from the aircraft during or after the landing. By noon, investigators had confirmed, through personal effects and aircraft documentation, that the remains were those of Howard Miller, missing since March 2011. The discovery answered the long-standing question of the pilot's location, but immediately raised more complex issues regarding the circumstances of the incident. The aircraft had been found approximately 28 miles northwest of the last recorded radar position, in an area that had been searched during the initial rescue operation. The condition of the aircraft suggested a controlled emergency landing rather than a catastrophic crash, yet no emergency signal had ever been detected. FAA investigator Martin Reynolds noted several concerning observations in his preliminary report. The aircraft's emergency locator transmitter appears to have been intentionally disabled. The circuit breaker is in the pulled position, which would prevent automated transmission upon impact. Additionally, the radio equipment shows no sign of damage that would have prevented communication. Fuel gauges indicate approximately 40% capacity remaining at time of power loss, which contradicts any theory of fuel exhaustion as the cause of the emergency landing. As the excavation continued throughout the day, additional anomalies were documented. The cargo area of the aircraft was found to contain only 2 of the 7 supply containers listed on Miller's manifest. The aircraft's GPS unit, when recovered and analyzed, showed that the pilot had deviated from his filed flight plan approximately 40 minutes into the journey, turning northwest away from the established route to the research station. Most significantly, the ignition system of the aircraft was in the off position rather than having failed during operation. The body was carefully removed from the cockpit at 3:15 p.m. and transported to the Alaska State Medical Examiner's office in Anchorage for comprehensive autopsy. The aircraft was photographed, documented, and tagged with evidence markers before being secured for transport to an examination facility in Fairbanks, where aviation accident investigators would conduct a detailed mechanical analysis. The autopsy, performed by Dr. Chen on July 11, 2025, provided the first definitive information regarding Miller's cause of death. The medical examiner's report stated, "Decedent shows no evidence of traumatic injury, consistent with an aviation accident. Toxicology screening indicates the presence of secobarbital at approximately 50 milliliter per 100 milliliters of blood, a concentration sufficient to cause respiratory depression leading to death. The drug is not prescribed to the decedent. According to available medical records, manner of death is classified as undetermined pending further investigation." This finding contradicted the long-held assumption that Miller had died as a result of an aviation accident. The presence of a powerful sedative in his system, combined with the intentionally disabled emergency transmitter and the deliberate deviation from the flight plan, suggested a scenario far different from a tragic accident. The Alaska State Troopers formally reclassified the case from an aviation accident investigation to a suspicious death inquiry on July 13, 2025. The investigation team, led by Detective Sarah Nakamura, began re-examining all aspects of Miller's life in the months preceding his disappearance. Financial records obtained through court order revealed that Miller had taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy 4 months before his disappearance. The policy included a standard 2-year exclusion for suicide, meaning benefits would not be paid if the insured died by suicide within the first 2 years of the policy. Additionally, investigators discovered that Miller had liquidated several investments totaling approximately $85,000 in the weeks before his final flight. These funds were withdrawn in cash and could not be accounted for in any of his known bank accounts. Interviews with Miller's family members, conducted sensitively given the shocking development in what they had long accepted as an accident, provided additional context. His widow, Ellen Miller, expressed complete disbelief at the emerging evidence. According to the interview transcript, she stated, "Howard loved flying more than anything except his family. The idea that he would intentionally crash or harm himself is impossible for anyone who knew him to believe. There must be another explanation." However, Miller's elder daughter, now 31, provided information previously unknown to investigators. She recalled that in the months before his disappearance, her father had become increasingly withdrawn and had mentioned financial concerns on several occasions. In her statement, she noted, "Dad was worried about something with the business. I overheard him on the phone once talking about options if something didn't work out. I was 17 and didn't think much of it then, but looking back, he wasn't himself those last few months." Further investigation into Miller's aviation business revealed concerning financial irregularities. The company, Northern Skies Charter, had experienced significant revenue decline in the 2 years prior to Miller's disappearance. Tax records showed the business operating at a loss of $124,000 in the final year, with mounting debt to several creditors. Most significantly, investigators discovered correspondence from the Alaska Department of Transportation indicating an upcoming safety compliance review that had been scheduled for April 2011, 1 month after Miller's disappearance. Former business associate James Thornton, interviewed on July 21, 2025, provided crucial context. Howard had been cutting corners on maintenance to save money. Nothing immediately dangerous, but definitely outside of regulations. He was terrified of the compliance review because he knew they'd find enough violations to potentially revoke his commercial operating license. Without that license, he would have lost everything. The mechanical examination of the recovered aircraft, completed on July 25, 2025, confirmed these allegations. FAA Inspector Reynolds documented numerous maintenance violations, including expired components, unapproved modifications, and falsified maintenance records. His report concluded the aircraft was being operated in a condition that would have resulted in immediate grounding had it been inspected. Documentation in the maintenance log contains multiple fraudulent entries intended to conceal the aircraft's actual condition. As the investigation continued, detectives focused on the missing cargo and the deviation from the flight plan. The manifest indicated Miller was transporting 7 containers of scientific equipment and supplies to the research station. However, only 2 containers were found in the aircraft, both containing personal items rather than the listed scientific equipment. Dr. Landon from the research station confirmed that the expected shipment had included specialized atmospheric testing equipment valued at approximately $380,000. A warrant to search a storage unit rented by Miller in Talkeetna, paid through automatic withdrawals from his account and thus maintained after his disappearance, yielded the missing piece of the puzzle. Inside, investigators discovered 5 storage containers matching the dimensions and description of those missing from the aircraft. The containers held the scientific equipment that should have been delivered to the research station. Additionally, the storage unit contained $79,200 in cash, packaged in vacuum-sealed bags, along with a passport in Miller's name but featuring a photograph of an unidentified male. The comprehensive timeline constructed by investigators suggested a carefully planned disappearance rather than a suicide or accident. The evidence indicated Miller had intended to stage his own death while carrying sufficient cash and false identification to establish a new identity elsewhere. The precise circumstances that prevented the execution of this plan, whether mechanical failure, weather conditions, or a change of heart, remain unknown. What is certain, based on the autopsy findings, is that Miller had consumed a lethal dose of sedative after landing the aircraft in a remote location where he believed it would remain undiscovered. The case was formally closed on September 3, 2025, with the cause of death classified as suicide. Ellen Miller, after being presented with the complete evidence file, chose not to contest the findings. The insurance company, which had paid the death benefit after the 2-year contestability period following Miller's disappearance, initiated proceedings to recover the $500,000 payment from his estate. The aircraft, after thorough documentation and evidence collection, was airlifted from the discovery site on August 7, 2025. The components relevant to the investigation were retained as evidence, while the remainder was released to the insurance company that had originally compensated the Miller family for the loss. The scientific equipment recovered from the storage unit was returned to the research institution that had contracted Miller for the delivery in 2011. On October 15, 2025, a small ceremony was held at Talkeetna Regional Airport, where Miller had begun his final flight. A memorial plaque was installed, acknowledging both his contributions to bush aviation in Alaska and the complex truth of his final journey. The text, approved by his family, reads, "In memory of Howard Miller, 1968-2011, the Alaskan wilderness keeps some secrets, reveals others, and reminds us that human lives contain depths unknown even to those closest to us. The case of Howard Miller demonstrates the extraordinary preservative capabilities of Alaska's remote, high-altitude environments. The consistent sub-freezing temperatures and annual snow accumulation created conditions that maintained the aircraft and remains in a remarkable state of preservation for over 14 years. According to forensic climatologist Dr. Eliza Marov of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, the location created a natural cryogenic chamber, essentially freezing time at the moment of Miller's death. Without the random chance of partial surface exposure through glacial movement and seasonal melt patterns, the aircraft might have remained undiscovered for decades longer, or potentially never been found at all. The Miller case joined the annals of Alaska's aviation mysteries, unique not in its beginning but in its resolution. For the 42% of missing aircraft never recovered in the Alaska range, questions remain unanswered. For Howard Miller, the discovery brought an end to one mystery, only to reveal a deeper one beneath the surface. The complex motivations and circumstances that led a respected pilot to orchestrate his own disappearance, only to have his final flight end in an unplanned and permanent conclusion, seated at the controls of his aircraft, as the snow gradually buried all evidence of his final decision.